Hello folks, and welcome to this latest episode of Your Questions Answered, which of course wouldn't be anything without your questions. I appreciate so much all of your comments, all of your questions coming in. So hit that subscription button, keep them coming, and we will do our best to answer more of your questions as the weeks go on. Had a great question in this week from a chap called Mert Diner, who wanted to know all about the cost cap rules for 2021 and the new wind tunnel regulations as well. So what I'm going to do is explain the new rules and crucially, of course, how the FIA and F1 are going to police them. So first of all, let's look at the budget cap. The aim of this cost cap is twofold, really. First, to create a more cost-effective championship, and in so doing, to ensure the long-term financial stability of both the teams and the sport. The knock-on effect of that, it's hoped, will be to lead to a more competitive championship, because you are essentially creating a level playing field from a financial perspective. At its basic level, the cost cap is exactly what it sounds like. It is a limit on the amount that every team can spend, and it's the same amount for every single team. It was due to be $175 million. However, 2020 proved to be a difficult year for everybody because of the global pandemic. And so the decision was taken to reduce that amount for 2021 when the budget cap came in to $145 million. That will be decreased year on year. So in 2022, it will become 140, then 135 from 2023 onwards. There is a stipulation, however, that if inflation goes above 3%, then the amount of the cost cap can be increased. Okay, now the key part. What does it cover? The easy headline is expenditure that relates to car performance. Seems pretty easy. So what it doesn't include are things like driver salaries. It also doesn't include, there's a list, customer engine payments, which have been capped at $15 million going forward, the team's marketing budgets, race team travel and accommodation, the salaries of the top 3 non-driver members of staff, the team's tax bills, the team's non-Formula One activities, so any income from that. That includes the running of their historic cars, and crucially, any expenditure as relates to maternity and paternity leave, sick leave, and any medical insurance costs or bonuses for staff. There are also exemptions in place for what are being called transitional costs, which is a way of referring to the unfortunate redundancies which some of the teams might be forced to take because of this cap. And also the scope of these exemptions, we should mention, has been widened as a result of how COVID has impacted the team's need to restructure. Capital costs, plant and machinery, also have a set limit not included within the budget cap for a 4-year period. So to start with, from 21 to 24, that limit is $45 million. From 22 to 25 and beyond, for that 4-year period, it'll be $36 million. Now, as we've already said, the budget cap is set at $145 million. However, that is for a calendar of 21 races. Should a calendar come in underneath that number, well then the cost cap will be reduced. Should the calendar come in over that number, the cost cap will be increased, and both to the tune of $1.2 million per race. So if Formula One gets its 23 race calendar this year, the cost cap will be not 145, but 147.4. Okay, so how is it going to be policed? Well, for the first time in 2021, Formula One will have a set of financial regulations. You can find these regulations on the FIA's website. So we go to the regulations folder for the Formula One World Championship. As you can see, they sit alongside the technical and the sporting regulations, and they hold equal regulatory value. You can give them a read yourself. Fairly extensive, fairly long, 47 pages in total. Now, overseeing all of this, a cost cap administration department of the FIA has been set up in Geneva. The teams will have to submit an interim set of accounts every June, and that will cover the period from January to April, with the full accounts due before the next season begins. So March 2022 is when the accounts will be delivered for the 2021 F1 season. This new financial department is made up of accounting professionals and auditors from outside the world of sport. They are leading experts in their field, and I'm told a huge amount of time and investment has gone into creating this department and thinking about the correct appointments in order to have an independent arm to deal with this financial regulation. So a lot of work already gone in there by the FIA and Formula One. Now, the question, of course, that you all have is what happens if there is a breach of the regulation? Well, there are 3 breaches and 3 different types of penalties. So we'll start with the smallest, which is a procedural breach. And that essentially is submitting your tax return late, which, like for the rest of us, will mean the teams will get a financial penalty. Beyond procedural breaches are overspend breaches, and for that there are 2 divisions: minor overspend, in which a team spends more than the budget cap but within 5%, and then there is the material overspend, which is anything over 5%. Now, the minor overspend will result in what is being termed a minor sporting penalty, which can be anything from a reprimand to a points deduction, a race ban, a reduction in the cost cap for the following year, or even a limit on wind tunnel time, something which we will come to talk about later. A material overspend, so more than 5% of the budget cap, will result in any and multiple of those penalties being applied, plus potential exclusion from the Formula One World Championship. These new financial regulations really are being taken incredibly seriously. Now, we said we were going to touch briefly on the new wind tunnel regulations because they kind of fit into this new oversight that the FIA will have over the teams and their ability to go and investigate the teams, not just on their financial operations, but also, of course, with these new wind tunnel regs. It has to do with a sliding scale that is based on success in the previous season. Now, in 2020, the teams could use their wind tunnels 65 times a week, but in 2021, that was due to be reduced to 40 times a week. The new sliding scale, however, means that dependent on where you finished the 2020 championship, means what percentage of that 40 times a week you're actually allowed to utilize. So Mercedes as champions will only get 90% of the 40 runs, which means 36. Every team then gets an extra 2.5%, all the way down to Williams, who actually get 112.5% of those 40 runs, meaning 45. These amounts drop substantially into 2022 and beyond, where the champions will get just 70% of those 40 runs, meaning they will have just 28 a week. Running down the championship order, every team gets an extra 5%. Meaning that the team who finishes last will actually get 115% of the 40 runs, which is 46, so 18 more than the champions. Now, how on earth do you police how much wind tunnel time the teams are using? Well, there is an element of self-policing because the teams have all agreed that if one of them abuses the system, then it opens it up for all of them to, and they've all agreed that this isn't a path that any of them want to take. Now, of course, as we know in Formula One, if you give the teams an inch, they will take a mile or more. So the FIA will run compliance, monitoring, and enforcement. They can visit any factory at any time and demand access to the team's financial and data usage records. Data usage itself has to be regularly reported, as does the data provenance of new and updated parts. So the data usage will be in each individual component's DNA. So something appearing from somewhere it shouldn't will be an automatic flag. So as we can see, it's really not a small change to the sport in 2021 and beyond. The cost cap and this sliding scale of wind tunnel usage could have a massively profound effect, one of the most profound effects of any era in the sport's history. Every team has to work smarter, make the best use of what it can spend and how it spends it, and think long and hard about what it chooses to prioritize for its reduced wind tunnel time. And all of this in order to stabilize the sport's finances and ensure its long-term survival, whilst creating, we hope, closer and more competitive racing on track. Well, that's about it for this episode of Your Questions Answered, and I hope we have answered your questions. Keep the comments coming. Keep the questions coming. Thank you all for watching, for your support. Hit that subscription button and you'll be the first to hear when anything is uploaded on this channel. For now though, folks, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.